Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Olga Ceran, and I'm an expert for scientific contacts of the Polish Academy of Sciences Scientific Center in Vienna. It is my pleasure to welcome you, both our speakers and our viewers, to a Trialogue webinar dedicated to the topic of brain drain and brain gain in higher education. The Trialogue project is a platform for exchange of ideas between scholars from Austria, Italy, and Poland, and it was initiated in 2020 here in Vienna in partnership with local organizations and research institutes. Today, as the topic indicates, we will be discussing various aspects of academic mobility. And I am very happy that we can welcome speakers that bring a variety of different backgrounds and very diverse expertise to the table and to the discussion. So it is my pleasure to welcome Dominika Czerniawska, who is a postdoc at the INSCONS project at the University of Leiden, where she researches international scientific consortia. Dominika is a sociologist by training. She obtained her doctoral degree from the University of Warsaw in 2019 and did her doctoral and postdoctoral training at the University of Manchester and at the University of Warsaw. She specializes in social network methods, which she applies to sociological data, including data about scientific mobility. She focuses in her research on science, higher education, and gender issues. And she's also the project manager of the research team of the Polonium Foundation, which links the Polish scientific diaspora. Our second speaker today, bringing her expertise on the Austrian higher education background, is Nadine Shovakar, who is currently the advisor for structural development at the Chancellor's Office at the University of Potsdam. Nadine is an experienced higher education manager with a focus on international relations and organizational development. She earned 2 degrees from the University of Graz in innovation management and Romance studies. And after graduation, she worked for 11 years for Universities Austria, which is the Austrian Rectors Conference. And today she will draw inter alia from this expertise, explaining us the research background and the higher education background in Austria. Nadine worked later at the University of Potsdam as the coordinator for the European University Alliance EDU. And now, as already mentioned, she is an advisor for structural development for the same university. And we are very happy to have you here today as well as an expert on the Austrian side. And last but not least, we are also happy to welcome Luciano Saso, who is a vice rector of Sapienza University of Rome and the president of the UNICA network of the universities from the capitals of Europe. Luciano Saso is a professor at the Sapienza University, where he received his PhD in pharmaceutical sciences in 1992. He is also an author of many well-recognized scientific publications. He coordinated several research projects and has been a referee for many national and international funding agencies, international scientific journals, and other cooperation initiatives in the last 30 years. In the last years, Luciano also participated in several projects dedicated to the topic of internationalization of higher education. He has been a speaker and chair at many of such conferences. And in particular, he was a member of the steering committee of UNICA for 2 mandates and currently is the president of the network. And we are also very happy to have this sort of expertise at the table and are looking very much to the exchange between all of you. So the webinar will be divided in 2 parts. In the first part, we will have presentations giving us a little bit of insight on the discussions in the 3 respective countries. And after the presentations, I will open the discussion and we will touch upon different aspects and different patterns that we can observe based on the presentations. However, before I invite you to contribute with your presentation, I would like to give the floor to Arkadiusz Radwan, who is the director of the Polish Academy of Sciences, the Scientific Center in Vienna, and who will make some introductory remarks against the backdrop of higher education reforms in Poland, both the reforms that have taken place and also the reforms that we are currently discussing. So, Arkadiusz, the floor is yours, and please open the discussion.
Dzień dobry, guten tag, salve, buongiorno, buon pomeriggio, depending on whether you are watching us live or maybe you will watch this on YouTube later on. I'm very happy to see some familiar faces and also some new faces on this event. As Olga mentioned, this is a platform for Polish, Austrian, Italian Trialogue, and we are discussing many questions. Many of them are around academia and the challenges that we are facing. And I think the topic that we are going to discuss today is particularly relevant for our mission for Polish Academy of Sciences in Vienna, in Rome, our sister institution, and elsewhere. What we are doing, we are basically trying to promote Poland as an attractive place for doing research, but we are also working towards fostering multilateral or bilateral cooperation involving Polish universities, institutions, and so on. But when we look at our track record in terms of, and now I'm coming to the topic of the seminar, brain drain, brain gain, brain circulation. So this track record is, I think, less than excellent, to say this mildly. We have been on the losing side, meaning more Poles are traveling abroad than we are able to attract international researchers to Poland. And also, if you look at data concerning academic mobility, specifically in-country domestic mobility, meaning people changing places down their career lane, those data are actually alarming. I myself, I was involved. Olga mentioned that there was an effort in Poland to change some things. One of those things and challenges that we faced was how to make academic mobility working better, but also how to flip the trend, how to reverse the trend so that we are able to attract more people, foreigners, but also some repatriants, some Poles who have been working all around the globe for maybe decades, and sort of show them that Poland might be an attractive place to work. So this is just a brief introduction. I'm not very convinced that these efforts that we made a few years ago have really contributed to the goal, but this is maybe too early to see. But I think everybody is now looking forward to hearing what our experts have to share with us from the Polish, Austrian, and Italian perspective, how those countries see themselves in this game, and also if this perspective is a convincing one, because if we look from the national perspective, we see the losers and the winners. But if we have a global take, then it is actually not a zero-sum game, because there are many empirical studies demonstrating that mobility increases the overall productivity. So the pie grows. So it is not just who gets the bigger slice of the pizza. It is also about letting this grow and maybe redistributing it somehow. So I'm personally very much interested in what you have to share with us, and I'm very much looking forward to listening to your contributions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Arkadiusz. I think that was a very nice opening that leaves many questions open, and I hope that we can answer at least some of them during the discussion. So having heard this, I think I would like to now invite Dominika to tell us a little bit more about the state of debate in Poland and her expertise on the topic. Dominika, the floor is yours.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me and having me. I think that, as Arkadiusz said, Poland is rather on brain drain side of the process, but the history of outflow of knowledge workforce in Poland has been lasting for decades. And in the recent 30 years, we experienced at least three major outflows. The first one was in the 80s when the martial law was introduced, then in the 90s when the higher education system just broke down and many people just left abroad or went to private sector. And the third one, which we know quite little about, was after Poland joined EU. And the first two outflows of, and I'm saying outflows because they were rather motivated by push factors. People left because they had to leave. So the last outflow and brain drain that happened after Poland joined EU is relatively little known and recognized. And what is the reason why it is so little recognized? It is because we do not have that much data. Basically, how we can measure migration on the state level is based on secondary data set, and we measure mostly PhD holders who at some point left Polish institutions and went abroad. And what we have experienced over the last 20 years is people living during first or second part of studies and then continuing education abroad. Mainly they obtained PhDs and started their career abroad. And there is very, very little we know about them. In a Polonium Foundation, we run a survey study about diaspora, and actually many people working, especially at the UK universities, obtained education there. So this is a blind spot in Polish research on migration. So on the one hand, Poland is suffer from brain drain. People are migrating to Western Europe, to the US, and to Asia. On the other hand, we do observe some amount of brain gain, and mostly among people from post-Soviet countries. We do have quite large Ukrainian scientific diaspora in Poland, mostly located in southern academic universities. We do have some people from Russia and Belarus, but as research conducted by Dr. Łuczaj showed, this scientific diaspora does not differ a lot from average quality of Polish science. So we can't observe this sort of additional boost, which is followed by migration. And the reason for that it's not really clear why it is so. Probably it could be attributed to institutional environment. And this is something that I constantly try to underline. The basic thing, that the most fundamental thing we need in science is very good institutional environment. Because even if we are able to gain some, retain and gain some talent, if there is no institution and no institutional support, they will eventually lead to environments and to countries that can actually provide this sort of support. So the question, and again, a question that we can't answer right now, is why people who come to Poland in substantive numbers do not show outstanding performance. Yes. So it feels that in Poland, Polish policy supports a lot brain circulation. Namely, they're trying to attract people who left many years ago, or send people abroad. And there are varieties of programs which are supposed to support this networking aspect of science. We don't know that much about how effective they are. We are still. I know that National Agency of Scientific Academic Exchange has prepared a report on one of the projects, but we are still waiting for it to be released. And then we will see whether the migration and foreign exchange has boosted these individual careers. Regarding when we reach to other research on migration and this positive boost after migration, we can see that over time the boost fades away. And basically, we can observe that people are more productive only after, like within 2 years after they migrate, and then they go back to previous productivity levels. Also, the productivity while migrating is mitigating by the host country. Not every host country sort of support the same boost of increase of productivity, and again, countries with better institutional environment are much better in increasing individual productivity. So the question remains: if we are able to attract and retain talent in Poland without building and developing institutional environment, are we able to observe increase of productivity, or are they going to, like this rising stars are going to just fade away because of the insufficient institutional support? To my knowledge, this European collaboration networks have supported academic exchange to a great extent, but only a handful of academic institutions have benefited. So it's quite selective. Maybe not when it comes to student exchange or administrative workforce exchange, but this more selective initiatives have been targeting only a handful of institutions, and many Polish institutions are not only excluded from international collaboration networks, but also they are excluded from Polish collaboration networks. So we are able to show that there are like double peripheral in that sense. So the flow of knowledge to this from and to these institutions is very, very limited. And there are multiple cases of Polish scientific institutions, maybe not at university level, but departmental level, that do not have any sort of international exchange, or the majority of exchange is only fueled by Erasmus Mundus program, which is not bad, but it's not particularly selective, and because the time people spend at a hosting institution is very short, also the impact is limited. What I would like to underline in the remarks is the effect of COVID, basically, we don't know how COVID affects migration, because we know that people are sort of visiting, but they are not going and moving abroad. So the contacts with hosting institutions are different. They are not even limited. They are just different because online communication is different. On the other hand, because we are using so much of ICT, the access to international and top institutions is quite easy now, and it is something new. The quality of communication is something new, and the access to outstanding and top scientists working around the world is in fact easier than ever. So there is a chance to build significant collaboration networks using those tools. And when we look at the composition and the absorption of international knowledge in Poland, we can say that Poland is a relatively closed country, namely that not many people come and not many people go, and there is. Though international collaboration increases over time, it's still at relatively low levels. But also, a corpora of knowledge is not well integrated. When we measure it by the citation, it might be attributed to many factors. Basically, I look at the size of Polish scientific community, which is very large. We have hundred thousands of knowledge workers at universities. So there is enough internal circulation to develop science, but also this recent abrupt events like the breakdown of scientific system in the 90s, where all Polish community was basically cut off from international collaboration because there was no resources, and it was even hard to read any paper because there was no access to anything. And now we are seeing this long-lasting effects of this of the policy in the 90s and early to 2000, because it's not so easy to change due to accumulative nature of science. Despite the policy aiming to reinforce brain circulation, we don't see any effects yet. It doesn't mean that it's not there. We just need more time to observe whether there is going to be any effect. Based on the research Polonium Foundation has conducted, Polish scientific diaspora is to some extent keen to collaborate with Polish institutions, but apparently Polish institutions are not flexible enough to absorb what they have to offer, and it is mostly due to rigid structures. That if you come, you have to come for 6 months or whole semester. There is very limited opportunity for visiting positions. So on. We had some accounts of negative experiences in collaboration with Polish scientific institutions, but I would say that it always happens. Probably, if we look at other countries, it would be exactly the same. The issue is that no one knows how large this Polish scientific diaspora is, and we spent months and months looking for any sort of data to estimate the size of Polish scientific diaspora, and in the end, we had to use some mining techniques and recognize the ethnicity based on names and surnames, just scraping email addresses. So I think that without information and data about scientific diaspora, it would be very hard to utilize the potential that is out there. So these were my closing remarks. So basically, what I would like to underline is that we have to work on institutional environment and build our policies on data. And we are lacking so much data in Poland to actually inform decisions using some significant results. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominika. You definitely touched upon many different topics in your presentation, and I already have a couple of questions, but I will save them for later. And in the meantime, I would really like to invite Nadine to present the Austrian side of the debate. Nadine, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Olga. And there's a presentation. So welcome also from my side. My name is Nadine Shovakar. I work at the University of Potsdam, but I'm Austrian by birth and I'm here since 2020. So I'm mainly going to draw on my experience from working as an international relations officer for Universities Austria, which is the Austrian Rectors Conference. Let's see. Yes, this works. I'm going to speak about 5 things. First of all, generally the situation in Austria when it comes to brain drain and brain gain, as in how many people leave, how many people come. Then some data and trends for students and academics. We're going to look into the main countries and regions of origin and destination. And then we're going to ponder about the reasons to stay in Austria or to stay abroad. And then I'll give a quick wrap up. So let's dive right in. First of all, Statistics Austria every year issues their Wanderungsstatistik, as they call it, where basically they look into how many people are leaving and how many people are coming to live in Austria. So they look at residential data, and this brings a balance or a total plus of 40,000 people in 2020, that is. So there are 40,000 people more living in Austria after 2020 than before. These 40,000 more mainly come from the EU, 3/4, about 30,000, and 10,000 from third countries. I've picked out the countries of interest, so there are about 1,837 Austrians leaving, one of them being myself, moving to Germany. Then there are a plus of 1,633 Italians coming, and 754 Polish people have moved to Austria in 2020. So this is just to set the frame. Of course, this is not just academics and students. This is basically the total population by nationality. Wait, let me see. Up. It doesn't want to move. Let me try again. Yep. There, now it's working. Then to add to the Austrian situation, the Ministry of European and International Affairs also estimates the total number of Austrians living abroad. So basically they have a little register. They try to stay in touch with the Austrians who don't live in Austria anymore. And they are estimating that there's about 500,000 Austrians living outside of Austria. So of a population of a good 8 million, about 500,000 Austrians live abroad. In the this little study that we did, we were mainly looking into Germany, Switzerland, and Great Britain, because for academia, these are very important countries. So in 2014, there were approximately 180,000 Austrians living in Germany, 40,000 Austrians living in Switzerland, and 18,000 living in Great Britain. I unfortunately don't have data right now for Italy and Poland on this specific item. When we're looking into international students, there was a study conducted in 2014 on student mobility within the European higher education area by IHS, the Austrian Higher Institute for IHS, Höhere Studien for Higher Studies. And they basically calculated an import-export ratio. So basically degree-seeking students who go abroad for their studies. So the whole European higher education area has a 1.7 ratio. That means almost double the amount of students come into Europe to study, and then they leave in the same term. The most popular country is the UK, with about 16, if I read correctly, 16 times the amount of people come in, then they leave. And Austria is also very high. I'll elaborate a little more on the next slide. So for the EHA, for the entire higher education area, it is 1.7, and for Austria, it's even 5.4 times higher, the rate of people coming into Austria to study than leaving Austria to study. So who are these international students in Austria? The Austrian student population is around 26% is international. So and even with the newly beginning students, it's about 35% of the student population is non-Austrian. So it is very high. It is mainly focused on the art universities, which have about a 50% international rate. And then the universities in the west of Austria, because there are a lot of people from Germany and Italy. About 97% of all Austrian students come from Europe, of which about 3/4 are Austrian by birth, and the rest are from other European countries. The main countries where people come from who study in Austria are Germany and Italy. Italy, mainly the what you could call South Tyrol, so the German-speaking part of Italy, as well as Turkey. And we are looking if this works, hopefully. Let me try again. Yep. Where do students mainly come from? As I was saying, most students come from Germany. This data is already, it goes back to a thing we used to publish when I used to work at Universities Austria together with Professor Fassmann, which was called Internationalisierungspanorama, where we were looking into basically mobility of students and academics. So for 2012-13, the main country of origin was Germany with about almost 40%. Then if you combine all the former Yugoslavian countries, this would be the next strongest with 11%. And Italy also about 11% of the international students in Austria would come from there. And then if you look into Poland, it is still 1,532 students who are Polish amongst the 67,000 of international students in total. And is it moving? Let me see. Yep. Why do students move to Austria to study? So what are the pull factors? Students think there is always actually Studierendensozialerhebung, so basically that same Institute for Higher Study also always questions the students every year for all sorts of things in their basically how they are socially set in their lives. And also they ask international students, why do you study actually in Austria? And they are saying that they come to Austria because this university in particular has a good reputation for the quality of studies and also for the low study costs in Austria, as there are almost no tuition fees, especially compared to the UK or other countries. And also there are general things in Austria which people like, which is a cheap housing. They would like to learn German. Austria is close to home. These are probably the lot of European countries actually, and also because some people would like to just live in Austria, stay in Austria. Then coming to the push factors on the next slide is trying to do that. And basically, why would people come to Austria? Basically, what are reasons from their country of origin? One is I had to leave my country, or my studies weren't offered in my home country, or I didn't get a place at the university. They occur less frequently overall. However, it's a little more frequent within the German student population because, as you know, the German system has very strict entrance requirements compared to the Austrian situation, for example. So, and also the South Tyrolean students probably would like to study some or have a bigger variety of German-speaking study offers in Austria, whereas the people from Yugoslavia and Turkey mainly come for the pull factors. So this is what we found out about the students. Next, from students to they graduate, ultimately, luckily. And we were also in a different Internationalisierungspanorama looking at that and also into the absorption into the labor market, because obviously with a lot of, about a quarter, more than a quarter of international students, the media and people in Austria also ask, are those students staying? Are they ultimately going to add to the Austrian economy? And the OECD has published in 2011 their international migration outlook, and there they would say for Austria that about 17% of the students only remain when they graduated. We were looking into that in one of the publications of Universities Austria, and there we were looking into the social data. We were basically, obviously anonymously, combining student data and then later labor market data and seeing whether students pick up work after they graduated or if they leave the country, because you can also sign off the social securities. A lot of people don't do that, so the data is not very good, but we came to an estimation looking into all that data that we would suggest that around 16 months after graduation, about at least 40% of most graduate groups, we're looking into different groups, have become employed in Austria. So there is quite a strong absorption also of the graduates and the people who finished their studies. One little sidestep will be there, hopefully. Yes. What happens to international graduates? This obviously doesn't apply to Polish and Italian graduates, but just to keep it in mind, people who come from third countries can apply for a job seeker visa in Austria for 12 months upon graduation. And then later on, if they find a job that pays well enough, they can apply for the red card, which is basically like a work permit without having any additional requirements that they need to meet, but they need to get a good enough job. So there is a way into the Austrian labor market after graduating in Austria, if you're a third country person. Now moving on into academic mobility, or in other words, international scientists, both in Austria and outside of Austria. In a different issue of the Internationalisierungspanorama, Professor Fassmann and myself were looking into the three major countries where Austrian scientists go, namely Germany, Switzerland, and the UK, and also into the representation of scientists from these countries in Austria. So if you look at the Austrian population of academic staff at the universities, there is about, again, a 25% rate of international people. So 3/4 are Austrian and about 1/4 is coming from a different country. Again, it's a lot of German people. So out of the about 10,000, 9,400 international people, 4,000 are coming from Germany, or 45% of the international population. Switzerland is much less, 158, and also the UK is much less. So we were looking into why this happens, or what might be the reasons for it. And I'm trying to move to the next slide again. Yep. We also looked at the other side of the mobility, and this is Austrian scientists abroad. Again, we were looking into the UK, Switzerland, and Germany for being the most popular destinations of academic mobility in Austria. And we were actually contacting the the British and the Swiss and the German Meldeamt, so basically where people have to register. So we were looking into contacting their statistic offices to learn how many Austrians work as, again, academic personnel in Germany, in Switzerland, and in the UK. So altogether, we came to a number of 3,600 people, of which 738 are professors, which is obviously very high compared to the normal professor rate. And as you see, a lot of them work in science and a lot of them work in medicine. So these are the most popular fields where Austrians who move abroad actually work in academia. Then trying to move forward again. Yes, so what did we see? Like, there is always a bit of discussion between the Austrian and Germany. Obviously, Germany is a very big country. A lot of German students already come to Austria, and then also a lot of academics come here. So if you compare the two countries directly, there are 2,200 Austrians employed in Germany and 4,200 Germans employed in Austria as scientists. And actually, at first it feels like, okay, there are so many Germans in Austria, but if you think it's also 10 times the population, it is interesting to learn that actually Austria is a net exporter of university scientific and artistic personnel. So because they're so, actually the 2,000 are quite a lot for such a small population as Austria is. So there is also brain drain happening in Austria. And one side note is, if you think of it, there are more professors working in German, Swiss, and British universities combined than all the professors working at the universities of Graz, Innsbruck, Salzburg, Linz, Klagenfurt, Leoben, and Krems put together. So this is quite remarkable. Or there is also quite a big brain drain in this very educated sector of the Austrian population. Yeah, in the academic mobility, we also, there was another study conducted among Schrödinger fellows. Schrödinger is basically a scholarship for very highly talented Austrian scientists who then go to very reputed international universities, and a lot of them don't come back. So they conducted a study, sort of, why don't you come back? And they said either they got a very attractive job offer abroad, or also, and that's a little sad, because they do not see long-term employment in Austria. So with all these, like always, befristet, like always only for a certain time, labor contracts, people don't see a long-term perspective. And most people who do come back to Austria do it for family obligations, which is also not precisely why you would like people to return. Lastly, and to wrap up, my presentation has been a lot about numbers, because I think it's always good to actually get a feel how many people do actually leave or come back. And you see that in Austria, there's a lot of migration, or a lot of at least European migration that happens. But of course, one shouldn't leave sight of the fact that having international people here and also Austrians leaving, and the whole question of brain circulation is very important, because it makes everybody better. Like intercultural exchange and science in particular is always international, and it thrives in diverse teams. It lives off being international, of having people from different backgrounds. And of course, any attractive and competitive university always needs a cosmopolitan environment. So we are very happy in Austria to have many international students, and also many international professors and academic staff. And that's what I would like to wrap up with. Thank you very much for listening. And I'm looking forward to the further discussion. And yeah, I think it just says thank you on the last slide.
Thank you very much, Nadine. I think this goes well with Dominika saying that we need data to make good policies, and you definitely collected impressive data on academic mobility in Austria. Thank you very much. I already also have a couple of questions, but before we move to the questions, I would like to give the floor to Luciano to share his insights on Italy and your work in international collaborations.
To Arkadiusz and Olga for the invitation. This is a very interesting event. I also listened with great interest to the previous talks. So we can move to the next slide, please. Can you please give me the next slide? Yeah. So just very briefly, I'm president of UNICA, which is an association of 54 universities in 38 capital cities, including, of course, Rome, Vienna, and Warsaw. And UNICA is based in Brussels and deals with the main topics which are felt strategic by universities. And of course, brain circulation is one of them. So it's a great pleasure for me to be in this meeting and to share some of my ideas I have to say about this. Next, please. So I want to start with something more general. I mean, in my opinion, brain circulation is part of internationalization in general. So the first question is, I've been dealing with the internationalization of the university for a long time, and still it's interesting to ask ourselves, is it necessary? Is it something that's strategic for universities? Of course, my answer is yes, and let's see why. Next, please. Even in this moment, we are in this difficult time of a COVID crisis. There are many financial issues for higher education institutions. But I think in this moment, even in the moment of crisis, I think it's very important to invest in internationalization and in making sure that mobility of students, of graduates, of academic and administrative staff is done properly. Next, please. So it is not something that we add to our activities. I mean, internationalization of universities should be mainstream, should be something very, essential in the activities of universities. Next one. And then quickly also to the next one. So that this is just a little joke, but to say that is important. Without internationalization, we cannot actually survive properly in the modern world. Next, please. So, and then going to some of the points related to this, of course, this helps university to do benchmarking, to develop policy and strategies, to develop strategic partnerships, to create excellent learning and research environment. In this case, I liaise with what Nadine just said a few seconds ago, related to the fact that when we internationalize a university, we improve the learning environment, we improve the research environment. Many ideas, history proves, came from foreigners, who came with another different mindset, with different culture, to different worlds, and then in this way, humankind evolved, in the last centuries. So, of course, it is also important to attract not only good students but also professors from abroad, and in this case, again, good circulation of brains is really key. And of course, also administrative staff is also very important, because administrative staff is really the backbone of our institutions. So next, please. So reputation also, of course, when we send out students or graduates from our universities, they represent us in somehow. So when they do well abroad, this is also a positive effect for our university. So sometimes what we call the brain drain can also be very helpful for our institutions, for our countries. They can actually foster new, cooperations at the academic level or in general for the societies. Next, please. And also, let's remember that rankings, which of course sometimes we don't like rankings so much, or we consider rankings, of course, controversial exercises. But of course, the internationalization is key. Student mobility is key for many rankings. So I think it's also, from this point of view, is also important to keep in mind these aspects. Next, please. And again, also for the employability, because when again some students or graduates get good jobs in companies or in other institutions, again, if they do well, abroad, they can actually again foster new cooperations, and they can increase the employability not only for themselves but in general for other graduates or students from the same institutions. Next, please. Of course, also internationalization is key to attract external funding to our universities. Next, please. Alumni relations, is key, I think, for institutions to keep in touch for as long as possible with students and graduates, who decided to go abroad. I think we cannot, it is not fair, and also it is not appropriate to reduce mobility, to discourage, international mobility of our graduates, our students. On the contrary, it is key to keep in touch with them. Of course, they can become experts in the future for our universities, for teaching, research, for innovation, for civic engagements. They can become mentors for our students. They can actually also foster endowments, if they become successful. And overall, I consider this also an indicator of quality for the institutions. An institution which has really a very good, links, bonds with with its alumni, also means that it's a good institution, because alumni wants to give back to the alma mater of their life. Next, please. So in the end, in my opinion, what we call a diaspora, what we call brain drain, cannot be avoided. This happens for all countries in the world. I don't know any country in the world which does not have some of the best talents, who at a certain moment decide to leave the country and go somewhere else. Of course, some countries are probably suffering more than others. But the solution, in my opinion, is not to avoid that. It is not avoidable, but to make a wise use of the people that in the end decide to go abroad, and then try to make sure that they become antennas for the country. They can foster further development of our countries, and actually make sure that they are high potential human resources. Or try to find opportunities to bring them back. To bring back the people that are living in our countries. Next, please. Also, I think we have to distinguish when we speak about European Union. If we really, believe in our European Union, we cannot consider, the mobility within the European Union as a brain drain or brain gain. This is really something that is happening. We actually, thanks to the fathers of the European Union who started this magnificent project in the 50s. Nowadays we are actually having seen the fruits of this work. The European Union grew, became stronger. We had the Schengen Agreement to make sure that the mobility, among several countries in Europe, not all of, unfortunately, is very easy. So I have to say that within the European Union, I think it's really the circulation of brains is something beneficial. I mean, each country should try to attract the others and make sure that we really go towards what we call a European citizenship. Families, with members from different countries is very beneficial, I think, for the families themselves and then for the countries. Next, please. And then again, as I said, on one hand, we have leaving our country, and we need to do the same. We need to try to attract other, young people to our universities, to our societies, to make sure that the level of internationalization will increase. I think this is very positive, and try also to, of course, understand each other better. Maybe one of the issues of European Union, of course, is the language. We have at the moment 23 different languages, and this very often is a barrier. But again, more mobility, more brain circulation in the next decades, I think, will help a lot also the society to become more global. Thank you very much. Next one, please. I think I close here with this, just the same concept. I mean, matching skills, trying to have young people to move to different countries, where actually those skills are necessary, and try to make sure that everyone will develop his or her own career in the best way. Next one. And so this is already mentioned. Next one, please. Perfect. I finish here. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Luciano, for sharing your expertise and your insights from the many years you worked at Unica. I think we are now ready to start the discussion. And actually, we touched upon many different issues. And I was just wondering, since you also, Luciano, said that in the EU, brain circulation is the new norm, and we should definitely encourage mobility and encourage people to develop their skills and develop their knowledge by also benefiting from different expertise in many different places. And of course, there is also a big discussion taking place about the fact that science is global. And I guess Dominika will also have something to add here, working on international scientific consortia. At the same time, Nadine was also talking about graduates staying in Austria and research into whether graduates actually stay in Austria or not. And here I think we have a couple of interesting questions. First is, of course, about the language we use. Should we really talk about brain drain and brain gain? I think there are also articles speaking about brain drain in Italy that show that empirically many Italian researchers abroad actually don't identify with the notion of brain drain when they describe their own experiences. So my question to you, my first question would be, should we be really talking about brain drain and brain gain? And should we actually try to encourage people to come back or to stay after graduating? Or should we actually encourage them to move if this is beneficial for them, and try to compete in different ways? So try to target national academic markets and talk about national academic markets maybe more than international, that individual life trajectories. Dominika, I think maybe you could start with this question. Thank you.
It's it's very like with the language we use when we talk about brain gain and brain drain creates this sort of competition, that someone loses and someone wins, and there is no option to like zeros win-lose situation. So I absolutely agree that maybe we should try to rephrase it, but I don't see any appealing any other appealing language we could use. And when it comes to regulating, motivating people to migrate, to come back, to circulate, I definitely think that there should be some policies in place, because when we look at natural dynamic of science, like how scientists behave and how rewards are distributed in science, there's obviously preferential attachment mechanisms. What is preferential attachment mechanism? One might ask, and it's Matthew effect, that rich gets richer. So the largest universities, the richest universities, and the richest countries get more and more talent, and they're able to retain more and more talent. Hence, they're able to retain more, gain more resources, and then it becomes like, if we let it be, then it becomes 0-1 game, that these big institutions win and smaller institutions lose. So I definitely think that there should be some mitigating policies in place. It doesn't mean that no competition should be available on the academic markets, but some pressure that would flatten the curve of this Matthew effect should be introduced. Yeah, that's all I have to say about it for now.
Thank you. Then I would like to invite Nadine to maybe make a comment or two from the Austrian perspective. In your presentation, you also mentioned that brain drain in Austria is perceived as an exception, which I found very interesting in terms of the narratives in which academic mobility is phrased. If you could develop this thought a little bit more, this would be great as well.
I think it's mainly because people notice that there are a lot of students, international students here, mainly a lot of them coming from Germany. So it's more a feeling that a lot of people do come in that terms brain gain, and the brain drain is not so obvious, because as also Dominika was saying here, it's the same thing. There's not so much data on it, and the one doesn't know so much about the people who left because they are already gone. But it is a fact that also, I mean, basically scientists are people as everybody else, so they follow two things. One is that's probably stronger in scientists than in other people. They follow their interest. So they would go to an institution where there are a lot of other interesting scientists working there. Besides that, you can work internationally online, but still they would go into an environment where well-stocked labs are there, so where the conditions to conduct good research are favorable. That also has to do with money. And the other money fact is just the wage that people would get. So they do follow the money, if you say so, follow the conditions that are being given. So in an ideal world, to just also make a link to the first question, of course, it is brain circulation, there's no gain, and we are all Europeans. But of course, on the other hand, you have the national households, and they say we are financing students, or we are making money from this or that patent. So people in the end, since the system in itself is not, and then COVID again is a very good case where you could say it's a global threat, but the answers were national, because that's how people are organized. So it is in somewhat, and I fully subscribe to that, but it is a bit idealistic to just say it should be brain circulation. Of course it should be, but it doesn't always match reality. And there are regions where a lot of people leave and a lot of talent is gone, and people still need hospitals, and they need doctors, and they need lawyers. And so it is philosophically, for sure, brain circulation, and people should move if they want to. Also, it shouldn't be a push, that people shouldn't be required. Like also academic mobility to some extent is sometimes almost forced, that like postdocs have to move to a different country in order to further their career. So it is partially an ideal and a necessity for science to be international. But of course, there are local and national regulations and requirements and realities which don't always match that sort of idealistic view that everybody should share their knowledge. Yeah, that would be it for me for now.
Thank you very much. That's great. So I think, sorry, Dominika, we don't hear you.
Could I only just say that I second Nadine absolutely, that this sort of brain circulation narrative is idealistic because we can't observe brain circulation. What we do observe is outflow and inflow. And we would have brain circulation if actually sending country would also be a host country. And this is not something we are observing in Europe. So it would be great, but we don't have data supporting this idea.
Thanks. Thank you very much for your intervention. And I think against this backdrop, I would also like to push Luciano maybe a little bit, because of course your work at Unica is about building collaborations. But at the same time, I'm also curious if you observe these national sentiments and maybe a little bit of struggle within the network regarding these topics.
No, thank you. I mean, since I'm the idealistic guy here, I want to defend a bit this position, saying European Union, it is an idealistic project. I mean, when it was launched in the 50s, it was really launched very early, a few years after the Second World War, when the situation of Europe was really so terrible. And still some people sat at the table, dreaming about a better place, a better world. So I think this is I'm aware of the difficulties, but this is the way to go. I mean, if we reason, especially within the European Union, I mean, and as Italian, of course, I belong to a country which, of course, loses some brains very often in some fields like medicine or engineering, which are also quite expensive curricula, I mean, to training, etc. But still, I think the way is not to reduce, not to discourage this mobility out. On the contrary, try to attract other talents. So when I speak about circulation, is not the same people. Some people will go out, some other people can come in. And I think what we should do in each country, in each institution, is to do a very careful SWOT analysis to see which also are our strengths. Because sometimes, we lose some people, but we can attract some others, or we can attract the same people after a while. Because I know many colleagues from Italy who left when they were young, but after maybe 20 years, they say, okay, if you give me a good opportunity, maybe I would accept even a lower salary to go back, because their families there, their leagues are there. So, but sometimes we are not good enough in providing those opportunities, in trying to, again, as I said, keep in touch with them, offering the opportunity to come back. And again, in some fields, of course, in Italy there are some very, very strong fields, and I don't want to mention them here, but in different parts of the societies, which can be very attractive for many people, from all over the world. So again, let's look carefully about what we have and try to govern a phenomenon that I try to express in my presentation cannot be avoided. The phenomenon is there, and I think we should govern it in the best possible way for the interest, first of all, of the people. People should be, in my opinion, helped to be, to live the happiest possible life. It's very wrong when I meet colleagues, for instance, Italians abroad, and they have a bad memory of how, their university or their institution, treated them in a way. They did not offer me any opportunity, for instance, to go abroad or to do something. That is a loss, because that person anyway managed to leave maybe the country, but in a more difficult way. If you, on the other side, you try to offer opportunities for people to go for a while abroad, to be maybe a scholarship or something, and then again come back, that becomes a gain. And again, I agree that it's we're talking about Europe now, but if we talk about the whole planet, of course, there are countries really, as Nadine said, with difficulties, not having enough doctors or lawyers. So that's another big issue. Okay, but those countries, unfortunately, probably need to be helped even more in different other ways.
Thank you very much. That's a very interesting perspective, one that is also close to my heart. And I really hope that we can all definitely go into that direction in a more sustainable way. And for now, I know that Arkadiusz has a question, so please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. We discussed some concepts, whether the way we frame this is a good framing or not. We discuss some empirical data and how maybe insufficient it is. But my question would now be about policies. And I would like to hear a bit from your countries and from your perspectives about policies that have or have not been implemented in order to maybe flip the trend, change something about being on the winner or on the loser side. In my first introductory remark, I mentioned I was myself involved in the Polish university reform a few years back, and increasing internationalization was one of the core goals for the reform, and also increasing academic mobility domestically. Partially, it turned out successful in terms of that we created a new institution, NAWA, which is an agency in a way modeled after the DAAD, the German exchange agency. So this we have, it has been around now for a few years. But when it comes to mobility, even the domestic one, inbreeding is the by far dominant way of pursuing academic career, from the student to professor emeritus, all the time with the same institution. So this is one of the problems in Poland, and in my opinion, it has not been sufficiently addressed in the new law. But my question would be to hear from you about policies implemented or considered or drafted for the future that have to do with brain circulation, brain gain, brain drain in your respective countries. Thank you.
Dominika, I think we can keep the order. Please start the round.
Sure. So the major problem with introducing new policies, especially in the Polish context, encouraging internal and international mobility, is that any sort of policy is perceived as extremely abruptive, and making people leave their post and move to another city without any guarantee that there is going to be any sort of stability in the end is also not something we want, because what we do now in Poland, we make a very small fraction of people to change place they are working, and then we are hoping that they will sort of find out their way through the system. And when there is not enough circulation between institutions, the only reasonable strategy from individual perspective is holding to what you've got. I don't know. It would be very much unreasonable to quit a permanent position at Polish university and go somewhere for to some other Polish university for 2 years only because someone encourages me to do. I wouldn't have done this, and I'm sure that many people wouldn't do it either, because there is no stability at some point. And this sort of balance between stability and flexibility also applies to international mobility, because if you want to become a host country and you want to attract international talent, your scientific institutions have to be flexible. There has to be a room to engage new people and give them a reliable promise that at some point, if they work hard and try hard, there is a great stable future. And this is something we don't have in Poland. We have such scarce resources, and the academic job market is so small that it's very hard to invite anyone and promise them that, yes, we can guarantee you, not we can guarantee you, but there is a chance that you would stay. And the circulation is something, of course, we learn a lot, but in the end, we are all humans, and we are at some point of our lives, we are looking for some sort of stability, that we can afford to have a worse year, and we won't be sacked and thrown away. So Polish system is extremely rigid, and there is no opportunity for inviting new people. And based on my discussions with people who decided to come back, this is part of their experience, that it's very rigid, hard to advance. You can have your own money, but it's not hospitable. On the other hand, you have very flexible systems with based on contracts, and they are renewed every 3, 4, 5 years. And in my opinion, it's not also the best policy for building a good good system and retaining talent. You're sending someone abroad for 1 year is one thing, but retaining them for longer time so they can develop a school, they can develop institution, actually build institution, is something different. And without the growing academic job market, it's very hard to achieve. And making people I can't even imagine how disruptive it would be if we actually fire everyone at Polish universities and make them move. I can't foresee this sort of future for any scientific system. So this balance between, my key message here is balance between flexibility and stability, at least as a promise.
Thank you, Dominika. This is very interesting, and it seems like the policy proposals should really focus on inner characteristics of the academic system first before they move forward. And this is also interesting looking at what Nadine said during her presentation, that in Austria, one of the main push factors is also the lack of long-term job prospects. So I was wondering, Nadine, if you know of any interesting policy ideas, policy proposals in Austria regarding this topic.
I think the best thing the Austrian government has done is basically they sent the universities in autonomy. So they gave them the chance there is a collective bargaining agreement, but the university can overpay. So they gave them the authority to hire and fire, and also to set their own HR policies. And this has led to something which is a tenure track system. So basically, young, promising scientists can, if they advance well, if they work hard, get a contract that if they meet their goals, it leads up to a professorship. So this is a long-term sort of perspective which is given to young scientists, which I think is great, but which I think also comes from that autonomy that universities have been given in Austria. And then I want to say two more things, which are funding or scholarships. The first thing the Austrian government has done is it has a fully portable student scholarship, if you will. So basically, when you've completed your bachelor's in Austria, you can study for your entire master's in Germany, France, Poland, Italy, and take the Austrian social money along with you. So there is full portability in that sense. It's a very European program. And the third one applies to young scientists. It's what I quoted before, that Schrödinger's fellowship, where basically it's for very talented young Austrian researchers. They can go to, UCLA, spend there between 10 and 24 months, and then get also the phase where they come back to Austria up to 12 months financed. So basically it is included. The thought is you might have to give up your position, whatever you have, you go there for 2 years, and then you have another year where you still get scholarship money, but you're already back in Austria to finish up whatever you were researching, to have time to sort of reintegrate, to get your sort of networks going again. So these, I think, are two examples where the Austrian government is looking beyond its national borders and fostering that kind of brain circulation and trying to give people opportunities also to come back and to have a long-term perspective. So yeah, that's what I would like to say.
Thank you very much. This is definitely interesting and ideas that we don't necessarily have in Poland in that form. So now I would like to move to Luciano and maybe rephrase the question a little bit, also drawing on your expertise from Unica. So of course we are curious about policy proposals and policies in place in Italy, but I was also wondering, for example, what scope for intervention would you see on European level if this is something that should be perhaps addressed by European policymakers?
Yes, thank you very much. Indeed, that's exactly what I wanted to say, that I think we should discuss more and more these issues at the European level and not at the national level. Again, if we really believe in the European Union, I mean, employability of young people is key for European Union, and we know already the projects of skills matching, is already there, but I think there is much more that we can do. I mean, there are figures really required in some countries and, very abundant in others. This, we have many examples of this. So for people to move is also really an opportunity within the European Union to find a good job relatively easily compared to, the situation they have back home. And again, this should be balanced overall to try, not to have, citizens living, only from one country and going to another. But in general, I think all countries have the possibility to attract European citizens and then offer positions to others. Of course, as I mentioned before, the main problem here is the language. I mean, we have different languages, so this is not so easy. Of course, you can move easily from countries sharing the same language or having similar languages, but very often this is not the case. So I have to think this is another topic for another webinar, or maybe a full, I would say, workshop of several weeks to exhaust the topic. But indeed, there are opportunities. We should have the courage to try to face them without fear. And again, I think the national approach is not, in my opinion, the most successful.
Thank you very much. And I would be very happy to have another webinar on this topic as well in the future. I think we are slowly running out of time, so I would like to maybe ask one last question, take a step back from this very optimistic, I think, picture that we have drawn to some extent, and to the harsh reality that some of the people who have left will not come back, as the data also suggests. Both Dominika and Nadine did mention it as well. So my last question perhaps would be, assuming that some of the students or some of the researchers will not come back, how can we actually leverage national scientific diasporas? What are perhaps the best ways to engage with diasporas, and whether you are aware of any such initiatives in your countries? Dominika?
It will be sort of self-advertising, but in Poland we have Polonium Foundation, which aims to bring together Polish scientific diaspora. It was not my initiative. I joined after a couple of years. So it is sort of grass movement. Just some people just decided it would be a good idea to bring Polish scientists working abroad together, share experiences, etc. And it has been supported by Polish government through different ways of funding. But to my experience, I might repeat I am repeating myself, that's for sure, that the first step is to learn about Polish scientific diaspora. And we have so little data about it that we even don't know how many people working abroad at universities or scientific institutions have Polish heritage or are Polish, and what are their attitudes towards Poland. And in my experience, my contacts with through Polish Foundation, also with people who have been living abroad for decades, were very positive. And these are not because some scientists, Polish scientists living abroad are popping up in Polish media now and then, but it feels that it's only a handful of professors who are just on the news list, and I'm sure that there are plenty of more. And there are some cases like Argentina that scientific diaspora did an enormous role to integrate Argentinian science with science abroad, and I'm sure that Polish scientific diaspora could play the same role. But it needs some encouragement, and it needs some moderation through institutional solutions and funding and policies. And it feels that Polish institutions are getting there slowly, but it's still not enough. Also regarding the general picture of Polish scientific diaspora. So. Again, repeating myself, but it feels like data is everything to tackle this issue.
Thank you, Dominika. So now I think I will pass the floor to Nadine, who is also abroad. So if you can share even your personal experience, that we're also very much looking forward to that.
Just quickly on the question of the networks. There's also one in North America of Austrian scientists who basically live in Canada, Mexico, or the US, and they also it's some sort of a network where they exchange and do things together, have chapters and all. That exists. Also, the universities more and more have their alumni clubs. They're like starting and more forcing to stay in touch with their graduates and their scientists. But my personal experience to wind up is I think a very global one, that in the end we should all, be ourselves, try to be global citizens if you want. And heritage is important, but I think the future is also important, and that's exactly where we should be heading, which is at least a European, if not a globalized understanding of ourselves, of me, myself, my family, friends, networks, my profession, and that maybe nationality is something in 50 years we won't talk as much about anymore because it is part of ourselves, but it's maybe not the defining, or not defining, but not that important and in yourself, or in your perception of yourself, that I am Austrian, hence I am a global citizen, and hence I wish for a better future for all of us. So that's my final comment.
Thank you very much. This is definitely an interesting perspective as well, in terms of how and why people gather around research diaspora organizations, for example. And now I would like to give the voice to Luciano. If you could also tell us a little bit more whether there are such initiatives in Italy. I know that there are many Italian researchers abroad, and what your experience from Unica in that regard was. We are very curious to hear more.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs actually created a network of Italian scientists abroad, but I think we can do much more. I think universities should really keep better in touch with the alumni, especially the ones going abroad. This is something I think we can do. Also, research institutions should do the same. I know I was in a meeting in Germany organized by the DAD, having exactly this goal. I mean, I think the DAD launched this alumni activities a few years ago already, and I think it's very effective. So I mean, there are tools to do that. And I think that also this tragedy of COVID, after it will be over, I think also will provide new opportunities, because we are working more online. I think before COVID was more rare to do these online activities. So in a way, it will be easier to connect with people abroad, especially for teaching, of course. So every university, if the university was in good relationship with the person who left, and again, the person, as I mentioned before, should not leave as as a desperate situation and very very upset with the situation before. But if it was a good development, even encouraged by his own or her own alma mater, the person can maybe give back, and sometimes nowadays online for teaching and also for research. And there are many remote labs opportunities nowadays. I know many of them in medicine, for instance, available, so you can do many activities, also practical activities in the medical field online. So basically, I think there is a lot that we can do with the people who are not anymore in our country, but still would like to give back to us.
Thank you very much. And with that, we have around 3 minutes left, but no pressure at all. I would like to invite everyone to maybe share a final remark and main takeaway from the discussion, or maybe a matter, a question on which they would like to know more. Starting perhaps with Dominika, then Nadine, Luciano, and with Arkadiusz having the final word.
Is that we need more data to understand the phenomena, and especially we need more data to understand phenomena of brain circulation for in countries that are not host countries, like Poland, and that basically there is a great opportunity to be a part of this circulation network, but for some reason we are not a part of that network. And also something that should also be brought into discussion, and we quite often forget about it, is a personal aspect of migration in academia and how disruptive it might be, especially for women. And we know, and we have multiple studies confirming that women in academia suffer a lot because they are not as mobile as men. So this personal life should also be taken into account, because as long as you're a single or you don't have children, it's relatively easy to mobile, but not always. The burden of mobility in academia is much higher for women having kids. So I think that we should keep it in mind as well, and also put some policies in place that would actually enable women to go abroad and to learn and expand horizons. So thank you.
Thank you. Please, Nadine. Thank you very much for joining, Dominika. And Nadine, if you want to add anything, then please.
Yes, I would also like to thank everyone. I think discussions like this is very, very important. If only it makes you realize that there are like 3 countries in this trialogue, and everybody has issues with brain gain, brain drain. Somebody's brain gain is other person's brain drain. So it is, I think, very important to look internationally and to understand that these phenomena we are in all of this together. And that's what I would like to finish off. And thank you very much again for the invitation.
Thank you very much for joining us today. And I think this also goes very well with what Luciano was saying regarding the United Europe and our common struggles, common issues, but also common opportunities. So now with that, I would like to give the final word to Luciano.
Okay, just a few words. Thank you very much, Olga. Thank you very much, Arkadiusz. It's been very interesting to participate in this event. And then, just let me repeat that, this issue is not easy to solve. I see the difficulties of brain drain, brain gain, or brain circulation. The wording can be different. But again, I think that more European integration can be useful to actually tackle this and other problems.
Thank you. I would also like to thank you all very much. It's been my pleasure, really, and I have a deep personal interest in the topic as well, being a Polish researcher abroad myself. And now I would like to give the final word to Arkadiusz. Please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much. Me and Olga, we are speaking now from Vienna, and actually we are sitting in the rooms that are not far away from one another. And in between, we have our library, which is also kind of a seminar room. And it bears the name of Copernicus, who is a beautiful example of brain circulation. He studied in Krakow, then in Bologna, and then in Padua. So many big thinkers traveled in the past ages. But today is a question also of some policies and, in a way, politics. There is this notion and discussion of if capital has a nationality. Some believe yes, many question this. And the question, again, can be asked if talent has capital, if talent has nationality, and what national policies should be. And we here in Vienna, we are emanation of this, one of those policies, but policies and strategies should be developed and improved over time. For instance, and this is my personal take, we are here in Vienna, and this is one of the biggest offices we have in Europe. Our smallest office is in Kiev. It's very modest, very small compared to the others. And I think, in a way, if we were to think strategically, if I was the president of the academy, the Kiev one would be the biggest, the most beautiful, the most generously funded, and so on. Because if you look at the map where Poles go and from what countries people tend to come to Poland, we are quite unlikely to gain many scholars from Austria or maybe Italy or elsewhere where we have our headquarters or offices. But we increasingly attract students and scholars from the East. So this would be a strategic question. I think many things we should think over and think over again. But I side with Luciano. I think we should be practical, but also idealistic at the same time. And we should look at Europe as something that is our common value and economic strength. And from this mobility across Europe, I think there's a lot of to benefit from, and we can be very happy that we have, for instance, Erasmus in place. It fosters this short-term mobility, but it sometimes the start might be modest, but then what grows out of this might be much bigger. And I think probably most of us somehow benefited in one way or another in some place from this program. Having said this, I would like again to thank you so much for joining us for this session and for the discussion. Also, I would like to thank our audience, live and future, and last but not least, to Olga for her excellent moderation of this discussion. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dziękujemy.